Okay, so we're live on YouTube, so I'm going to hit record, and then in about 2 or 3 minutes, we have 16 people joining. We'll start. I'll do a little introduction, and then we'll start. Thank you all for joining this webinar. My name is Dr. Bertha Ayi. I'm the president of Ghana Physicians and Surgeons Foundation. This is an organization, a nonprofit organization that was formed to support postgraduate medical education in Ghana after the Ghana College of Physicians and Surgeons was founded in 2002. And so this year will be 20 years old. And we've done many things in our 20 years of being alive, including mission trips, medical fiesta in Ghana. And one of the newest things that the medical students are encouraging us to help them with is direct mentorship, telling our stories. And our stories are extremely powerful. If you read the Bible is full of people's stories. That's just what it is. And this, the first event happened on December 17th. About 7 or 9 physicians shared their stories, and it was really, really empowering. And so we decided we'll do a session 2, this time involving the Ghana College of Physicians and Surgeons, as well as the Ghana Medical Association. So we've assembled a wonderful panel of speakers who were kind enough to share 2 hours of their precious time with us. One of them who's going to be the first speaker is my esteemed professor of physiology, an extremely, extremely smart person who taught me physiology in medical school and is now vice president of student affairs at his own medical school in the person of Professor Adukwe Hesse. So he will be speaking next. And Dr. Kwabena Eduntoso is a nephrologist who went to school in Ghana. He shared his interesting story the last time, and hopefully will share that with us again. And I also have all the speakers from the last time invited, plus a few new ones. Joining us will be the rector of the Ghana College of Physicians and Surgeons, Professor Danu, the vice rector, as well as the general secretary of the Ghana Medical Association, Dr. Titus Bayu. I will share the lineup, but as they become available to join us, we would add them on. And then Professor Vincent Ejapon also joined us. Somehow his link was given him trouble, so I'm going to add him from where he is as an attendee, and then he would be live as well. So thank you very much for joining. I hope this is an informational session like it was the last time. And so Professor Adukwe Hesse, I've done just a mini introduction of you, so you can introduce yourself into depth and kick the ball rolling. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bertha. Hello, good morning, and good afternoon, wherever we are. It's a great pleasure and honor. Where shall we start? Well, I always wanted to be a doctor. I don't know why. Frankly, I interview a lot of students, and they tell me all sorts of stories. Frankly, I just say that I always wanted to be a doctor. So I pursued science because I love science, basically what it is. I love science, and I did well in school, so I got to get into medical school. And and I got into medical school, and as you know, in that time, we used to do the basic sciences after doing the pre-med, the basic sciences for a year and a half, nearly a year and nearly about 2 years. Anyway, and there I got to, in being exposed, I got to like physiology, because physiology really, at that time, was a real science, real biology science, biological science for me. And I did well in it. So I was offered the opportunity to do proper BSc, in what is called an intercalated BSc. So I took 1 year off to pursue basic research in physiology. And it was a difficult decision, but because I liked physiology, I'd taken 1 year off. Actually ended up not being 1 year, but being 2 academic years off. What that meant was that the 1 year I took off, the class behind us, the curriculum had changed. The curriculum had changed from being 18 months of basic sciences to now 12 months of basic sciences. And so they were going to finish 6 months on, yeah, five and a half years of medicine. And so that meant that I couldn't join them, but I had to join the class behind them. And that was the difficulty. But I was so, very much interested in physiology that I decided to take that route. And so what happened, therefore, is that what I've left out is that when I joined, or we came to medical school, I was actually jumped a year. And so instead of doing 1 year in Legon, I went straight to Kolebu because of my grades. And so I had classmates who were at Legon whilst I joined my seniors. Then when I did a physiology, I came back to join my juniors, not my classmates, but my juniors, the 1 year juniors from secondary school. So there was I in school. I had 3 classmates, one from secondary school, and then one my seniors I met in at UGMS, and then my juniors from secondary school. So I had 3 classmates. No wonder I was very popular. Apart from amongst other things, I was very popular, and I was secretary of the Medical Students Association. That opened my eyes to other students and other health students, and that's when I started my international travels, representing the Students Association and so on and so forth. So after the medical school, I gained my BSc. The whole plan then was that catch them early, give them the BSc, then after house job, send them abroad to do PhD. So I got to go out with scholarship after my house job, and after 1 year as resident in physiology, I got to go out. I went to Birmingham, and there I did my PhD in physiology. So, and it was purely laboratory work, very academic work. And after three and a half years there, I got my PhD, and I got a good advice from my mentor, or what we had at those days was the tutorial system. And he said, yes, Aduke, you're good, you're going to do a PhD, but please do something else clinical. And I love the intellectual aspects of medicine, and that is internal medicine, being like a detective, knowing what the diagnosis is. After knowing the diagnosis, if you can do something about it, you do. Then that's it. That's the intellectual aspect of medicine. So after the PhD, I went back into clinical medicine. I had to go through the rigors of taking PLAB. This was in Britain, so taking PLAB, and then going through. Fortunate for me, I got a job as a 3-year residency job in the UK, and so we went through that, and then I got my membership. I finished my internship, and I got my membership in internal medicine, and I specialized in respiratory medicine. Whilst I did, for my PhD, I did renal and cardiovascular medicine, physiology. When we were going abroad, Ifua came to join me later. When we were going, that's my wife, when we're going abroad, we determined that this is what we're going to do. For me, PhD, internal medicine, 1 year, and then come back home. And we did a calculation, and we didn't even leave any leeway for extension of the PhD, extension of, so we had in mind 7 years. And of course, it never works out like that. But anyway, as things worked out, on the 7th year, when everything, fortunately for me, I gotten all that there was to get, my father died. So yeah, 7 years. My father died. So I came home. That was the only time I came home to bury him. And when I came home, those days, they are going through the bad patch and things were picking up, 1987. Things were picking up. And so I said, look, what am I doing? And my 7 years is up. So what am I doing where I am? Really, I should be come back home. So funny enough, when I came to bury my father, I was called for an interview. And I wasn't there, but my wife Ifua picked up the call, and she said, these guys said they're going to wait for me to come back before they interview everybody else. So I kind of knew I had a job coming back, but coming home and seeing how things were and how the future looked bright, and I didn't know then, but now I know it was a calling to come home. I went there and I went for the interview. They wouldn't give me that interview, that job, which was a senior registrar at that time. They wouldn't give me that job, which therefore from there on you're a lecturer in the London school, and you go on. They said they would give me a research job because of my research experience, blah 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 blah. And so then I asked myself, after all these so many years in lab, and so on, I really want to do medicine and do my physiology and teach medical students. Anyway, we are going home. So we decided we're going home, and I went back and stopped my permanent job. I just resigned. And I spent the rest of the months doing locums. When you do locums, you get a lot more money and you do less work. So doing locums, 1 weekend, you can get enough money for all the slave throughout the week. So anyway, that meant I traveled a lot in the country, just, from locum. Did locums, got everything ready, and we came back home. 1 month's salary in the UK paid for 1 year's salary in Ghana, but we still came back home. And that was really when I appreciated being home, that you had a worth. People looked up to you, and you could walk into the bank and see a bank manager. I tried getting seeing a bank manager to get a mortgage in the UK. It was not easy. And so on and so forth. I didn't get a mortgage. I had to go through a different route. But in Ghana, things are opened. And so we got busy, very, very busy. When we're coming back, when we're going, and part of our aspirations was that we're going to learn and come back, practice in Kolebu, but go into private practice and build a teaching hospital. That was the idea. Build a teaching hospital, a hospital that was a teaching hospital level and train students. It didn't really dawn on us that if we build a teaching hospital, we have to teach students. It wasn't, but it really was more of the standards and ability of what to do. And indeed, we had already gotten land for a teaching hospital. Indeed, when we came back, we looked for even better land and so on and so forth. But we got so busy with the mundane work of looking after patients and teaching students in Kolebu that going private took a long time, very long time. And then again, after some years, after being consultant and traveling around across the country, consulting for Ministry of Health, tuberculosis, HIV, and then going around the world as an African consultant in those fields, I decided enough of trying to do things and try to change things from the public was too much. It's always difficult. So I took an early retirement from being employed by the medical school. And because actually that was been our aim all the time, to go out into private. So I went into private medical healthcare. And then one day, one afternoon, so happened that Ifua came to my healthcare consultancy, and then a second boy came with a wife, and we're discussing, after at lunchtime, we're discussing life in general, and then I think it was roughly about, anyway, it was time for entrance into medical school. And the issue was that a lot of their friends could not get into medical school because there are not enough facilities. And so it came as, how come there are only this, and that time there were only 4 medical schools. How come there are only these 4 medical schools in Ghana? How come? How come there are no private medical schools? Those are their questions. And every answer we give, and the reasons why they were not, those 2 young children of ours now, of course, they're young in inverted commas, seem to find answers. And in that discussion, at the end of the day, we decided, yes, we can have a different model of establishing a medical school. And so we decided, look, okay, we too, your parents, we too, we know that we have the technical know-how. The two of them they're in finance. So you know finance, we need finance to establish. So okay, you bring the finance, and we would establish, we do the paperwork, and that's how it is. We decided we're going to start a medical school one afternoon, and that's how we started a medical school. They did going through the processes, and it's very tough. But we went through the process and did the paperwork and did go through the regulatory, look for money, and then we started a medical school, and we started with I think there were a total of 11 or so students, and then it's been going on for the past since 2015. Past 7 years, we're on the eighth year. And basically what it is that you have a dream, and you have, timelines and targets to achieve the dream. And basically that's how we did it. And everything by grace of God. We know it's by faith. We take the step of faith. I remember before we decided, I remember that one afternoon, it just dawned on my spirit that we'll have a medical school. Let Ifua take the lead, but we'll have a medical school. And that's how it is. And then, therefore, Ifua and I, fortunately, we are at home and everywhere together. So we share when these ideas come. It's easy to have someone to share with, and then bounce back. And then we decide that, okay, sometimes we argue a lot, but we decide, okay, we'll go. We decided that, okay, we take this way and that way. And basically that's how we have been, and we haven't regretted coming home. And it's been very, very rewarding. It's very rewarding. I think that's what has kept us going. That it's not rewarding in terms of money, but rewarding in terms of achievement and making an impact.
Right, right. Well, that's very interesting. Prof, thank you so much for sharing your journey. And I like the fact that when you left the country, you gave yourself a time limit and you were ready to come no matter what you felt you were leaving behind. For some people, it's not a simple decision. So for you to have taken that bold decision, that was very honorable, and you changed the lives of so many of us by doing that. And maybe I'll just piggyback on the last part you said. You said, even though you're always together, you argue a lot, but then you get things done. They said, can two work together except they be agreed? Before you come to an agreement, there has to be a little argument to come
yes,
to an
we should,
agreement.
yes. Yeah.
It's always good to argue a little. Yes. So thank you very much. So the next person to go will be Dr. Sami Hene. The last time we caught him at the last end, so he had to rush through his presentation. So this time I'm giving him the opportunity to speak next. And his story is quite interesting in the thing that deep in his heart, he wanted to be a chemical engineer. So he shared all that. And so we're going to give him the chance to share with the medical students again and listen to how he got to where he is now. After that, Dr. Ifua, I think she dropped off, but okay, Dr. Ifua Samuel Ode will speak. She's a nephrologist, and then we'll allow Dr. Vincent to speak as well. So, after Dr. Hene, Dr. Vincent will speak before Ifua. So thank you very much, Dr. Professor Hene, for joining us.
Thank you, Bertha, for having me. Well, I really didn't know I was supposed to speak right now, but I guess it doesn't really make much of a difference. So, well, I guess it's going over my story again. I'd like to say that Professor Hesse ended up being 2 years ahead of me. And when we entered, he was, I think, about to he was in physiology. So his colleagues were doing clinical medicine and he was doing physiology. And I also remember him very active in the Students Association. We used to have a relationship with the other medical school in Kumasi. But anyway, that is water under the bridge. So how did I go into medicine? I explained that I think that people have different routes to wherever they end up to. And so long as you are enjoying what you're doing, you have a passion for it, you probably are on the right path. Now, I had noted that I was not one of those people who was so determined that it was medicine or suicide, as they used to say. But I loved science, but I was also, I like arguments. And they used to say that I would always be a lawyer. So I have three things. I was going to be a lawyer, an engineer, or a doctor. In a certain sense, these things seem so different. But really, deep in my heart, I believe that I have somewhere the makeup for any of these things. So since I wasn't sure, in the sixth form, I did math. One, I was not too keen on biology, but I did math because it gave me a greater leverage in all the things I wanted to do. And especially because I felt that at the time you could also go into medical school with math. These days, because they've made it so restricted, unfortunately, you would have to do a biological science, but we could go into math. There was a restricted space. I think about 10% of the people admitted then could be taken in with math. What it meant is that you needed to do a lot better than your counterparts who did biology, but that was okay. So in sixth form, not only did I do math, I did what they call, math 3. It was optional. You did extra level of mathematics. So I did all that in readiness for any of these options. So for Kumasi Tech, I selected chemical engineering. And then in the medical school, I selected medicine, and it will surprise you, I selected administration as the next choice. Many people thought it was crazy. Probably was, because I mean, the competition to go into School of Administration was very intense, and it didn't make sense to select it as a second choice. So I didn't really give myself a lot of leeway. That meant you had to do very well at the exams. However, as I said before, on the day that we had the interview for the medical school, I was also admitted into chemical engineering in Kumasi. And the only reason I ended up in the medical school was because everybody thought that if 50 people were being taken into the medical school and you were lucky to be one of them, how could you turn it up? And my family members were like, oh, okay, so you're going to medical school. Nobody even talked about the fact that I was given the option to do engineering anymore. So I went to the medical school and started the journey. I must say that generally, I was quite comfortable with many of the subjects. In second year, I particularly love physiology also. And in third year, I loved pathology. But when I got to the clinical years, pediatrics, ONG, all seemed, there were things I was very comfortable with. But overall, I think that I'm, should I say, a cerebral person. I liked arguments, detective work, and things like that. So at the end of the day, in my mind, I always thought that something that fitted my persona was psychiatry. And then really, it was because of the challenge that I thought psychiatry offered. Many people did not like psychiatry, and they couldn't really give you the reason. Some thought it was too abstract. They couldn't understand what it was like, which was exactly what the challenge was for me. I wanted to do things that people didn't quite understand. So for me, it was a challenge, and so I ended up in psychiatry. Now, after my house job, there is somebody, we are related in a way. He was then Dean of Law. And he had a good friend in Nigeria who was a professor of psychiatry. And he said, look, Sami, you've always been talking about psychiatry. If you're still interested, I'll send you to my friend and we'll see what happens. So immediately I finished medical school and finished my house job. I didn't even give myself a chance to do anything else. I went straight into psychiatry. And I went to meet this man in the University of Benin in Nigeria. He was a very flamboyant and person. You just would love him. And he's the kind of person who he exuded a lot of confidence. And so I became like his first protege. So he did everything to encourage me. At the time, I thought I was going to America to pursue my dream of psychiatry. So I'd taken the exams, but he made me feel so comfortable and it seemed like I would be betraying him if I left. So in the interim, he says, why don't you take the exams for the West African College, which I did, and take the Nigerian college ones. And having taken them and passed, it looked like, what was the sense going somewhere again? So within 4 years of finishing medical school, I was essentially qualified to be a specialist. And I continued working there until 1990, when at the time I was torn between going back to Ghana, and then also I was half thinking I would go to America. Then something happened. I got a message about my dad not being very well. And I thought, really, you are his only son who's a doctor. Why would you not be available at this time? So I kind of used that as an excuse, and that's how I came back to Ghana. Long story short, I joined the medical school, and at the time, there were only 2 of us psychiatrists in the department. So there was a lot of work, there was a lot of responsibility, and you had to do virtually everything, teach, consult, and public things, so many things. But I enjoyed what I was doing, and I got so immersed in it that I really wasn't looking anywhere else. But let's see what happened along the way. One of the things I found was that in a field like that, especially where there were so few people, there are lots of opportunities. For example, I got to spend altogether about a year in America doing things related to substance abuse and so on. And I became a member of the American Psychiatric Association. I've remained a member since then, subsequently a fellow. And through that, there is always the opportunity, apart from conferences and things like that. I have a lot of literature. I'm always able to keep abreast with the latest in the field. One of the things that you find in psychiatry is that there is so much happening. I told people the last time that the brain is perhaps the last frontier as far as the organs of the human body are concerned that we don't know as much about. Those of you who follow the news will realize that President Obama, when he was leaving office, every American president has a legacy project for which they devote a large sum of money. In his case, I think about $1 billion. And it's all been channeled towards brain research. Every day there's something new about the brain. And every day there are new imaging methods, new treatment methods, and we get to know a lot more about the brain, which all help to deepen our understanding of the mind, its disorders, and the diseases that are associated with the brain. Because of that, I tell people that psychiatry is one thing that it would take a very, very long time, if ever, to be overtaken by technology. The reality is that you can have a tumor almost anywhere in your brain right now. The diagnosis can be done by a machine. The treatment, including the surgery, can be done by a machine. Human beings have become technicians in a lot of these fields. The brain is a little different. Even if we find blood tests for determining what some of the disorders that we deal with are concerned, when you come to treatment, they will always require the human element, because it's not only about what is physically wrong with some part of the brain, but the interaction between the client and you, the doctor, is always there. So if you're somebody who likes listening to people, who likes trying to provide answers, trying to determine what it is that worries people, it's literally like you enjoy talking and getting paid for it. I have not found one boring day in my life as a psychiatrist. And I think that anybody who takes that field will also enjoy it. Having said that, it's very important, if you want to be a psychiatrist, that you should know a lot first about medicine, internal medicine, I mean, and a little bit about virtually every other medical field, because there are aspects of psychiatry in every field of medicine. And if you want to be a successful psychiatrist, you should be able to differentiate those things that are not purely psychiatric, but fall into other fields. One of the things that you find also is that many patients become very attached to you, not so much because of what you do for them as a psychiatrist, but because of your interaction with them. You may be the most brilliant surgeon, the most brilliant gynecologist, or even physician. They see them, they make a diagnosis, they give them treatment, and that's it. But patients always have other things in their lives which they really would want to talk about, but they hardly have the chance to talk about it. But when they come to psychiatrists, our line of interrogation and questioning and history taking makes them feel comfortable to bring up issues which turn out to be perhaps the most important things in their lives, rather than what they purported to have brought up to you. So it's a very rewarding experience. And for those who think that if you're a psychiatrist, you have to spend your life maybe only in the wards or in the clinic seeing people whose speech does not make sense, I can assure you that there is a lot in research. There are people who are purely research psychiatrists, right from people who spend their time looking at images of the brain and different types of conditions, people who spend their lives doing only lab work, if that's what you are interested in, people who do clinical psychiatry in the field, epidemiology, and so on, people who look at different types of personalities, who deal with substance use disorders, personality disorders. All these things are in the field of psychiatry. And I can't bear repeating it, but all I can say is that a life as a psychiatrist is a truly rewarding one. And anybody who believes that they have a passion for people, they like to engage people, perhaps psychiatry is the area for you. In the last 10 years or so, the Ghana Medical and Dental Council determined that psychiatry should be one of the rotations that people should do as house job. And I can tell you that 9 out of 10 people who come to do psychiatry, some of them only because it was convenient at the time, but the time they've done with those 4 rotations, they say, sir, I think I want to do psychiatry. The question I always ask them is, are you sure? Why don't you go and do ONG? Oh, well, I did ONG. It was interesting, but I'm certain now psychiatry is the thing for me. So you're welcome. I'm not saying it's the only field. You are free to do anything you like, but I can assure you that for those who genuinely think that they like to engage people, perhaps psychiatry is the thing. medicine in general is a field in which I believe you will always find fulfillment because there's a wide range of things you can do. And your patients will ever be grateful as you will be satisfied. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Professor Hene. Thank you so much for sharing your life with us. Today, it was a little of a different twist compared to the last time.
Yes.
When you shared how the detective part of your brain seems to flourish in psychiatry, but thank you for that. I think the parts that I picked out the most was, look, if you think you understand internal medicine, then come and do psychiatry, because you need to be a successful psychiatrist. You need to have a good fund of medical knowledge to be able to tell when the lupus patient has psychosis, or when somebody who is on steroids for rheumatoid arthritis or whatever is having side effects from what you're saying. That at the end of the day, if you're not, you can't just come and say, oh, well, I don't like internal medicine, so I'm going into psychiatry. You need to know medicine very, very well so you can distinguish between what is purely internal medicine and what is mental or psychiatric about a particular illness. And then I also want the medical students to take from this that you said when you spent that time with the gentleman in Nigeria, you almost felt like, well, one, you felt you didn't want to disappoint him, and two, he had made you feel so comfortable. So what I've noticed is that when you go and do a specialty, sometimes it's a very easy or enjoyable specialty. If you run into a mentor who either is not very pleasant, is mean, etc., that interaction alone can drive you away from that field. You just associate that person with the field. So for those of you who are listening, I mean, Professor Hene has shared a lot with us, but I want you to remember how that individual in Nigeria influenced him he just kept on opening doors for him. And he was like, you know what, in Tree, we'll say, baby, Aneha, I'm enjoying this. Let me just go on. So thank you very much. Prof will stay around for a few questions. If he has to leave, I'll let you know so that you can ask him your questions. But this has been very instructive. So thank you. Next is another person, Professor Ejapon. I'll let him introduce himself. He's also in psychiatry. He's one person who, from his last story, he always wanted to run away from medicine and go into public health. And something kept on pulling him back into medicine. And finally, he found psychiatry and still went back to do public health of psychiatry. So I'll let him speak. After that, Dr. Ifua Samoa Ode would also speak, and then Dr. Kwabena Adun too. So while we wait for other panelists. So Prof, you have the floor. Thank you for overcoming our technical challenges. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. And good to see my senior and my mentor, Professor Samuel Hene, and other panelists. So I trained in Kumasi, did my medical school. Really, I didn't want to do medicine. It's similar to Professor Hene. I remember I was in Pope John Secondary School initially and doing maths. And my father, I had an agreement with him that I'll do biology, but I went to sixth form and found myself in the maths class, and all my very good friends were in the maths class. So I stayed in the maths class, and I think about a month or so, my father visited, and I told him I'm doing maths. I know he wants me to do medicine, but I can go. He said no. So it took 6 weeks of doing maths, and he dragged me to the biology class, and I eventually finished secondary school doing biology rather than the maths. So I went to med school, really enjoyed med school, but found out clinical medicine was not really what I wanted to do. I was very much interested in public health. In med school, second year, I formed an organization, the Community Impact Organization, with my classmates. There was a strike at the time. We all went to our various regions, to go and educate people in school. So I liked those kind of work. So when I finished med school, wanted to go to the US to go and do public health. I secured admission at Tulane University to do international health, but I didn't get funding. So somebody told me, you can come and just get a job to do in the UK, make your own money and go to do your public health. You have to pay the fees. They said the easiest job to do is psychiatry, where you can be able to quickly get some local opportunities. Unfortunately, it was at the time they were expanding the European Union. So there were so many people coming in from Poland and other European countries to the UK. So although the PLAB had been done, there were no jobs for people from Nigeria and Ghana, those of us that required work permits. So I remember at the time I applied for over 200 jobs in the UK. I just got one interview. And even for that one interview, there were about 60 people invited for one job. So some friend of mine, we had been in the UK together for over a year, just trying to look for jobs. He went to Ireland and he told me, look, just come here. I just found a job here and it's easier to get a job. So I applied for 7 jobs, got 2 of the jobs and eventually trained in psychiatry. The plan was still to just go there for 1 or 2 years, try to raise some money and go to the US to do public health. But when I entered psychiatry, I found out that I was really enjoying it. I saw it as a huge opportunity, so I stayed in it, completed my basic training, and also did higher specialist training where I opted to do academic psychiatry at St. Patrick's University Hospital. I still wanted to do public health. So after doing my first doctoral dissertation in clinical psychiatry, I enrolled to do a PhD in global mental health at the Center for Global Mental Health in Dublin and completed that before moving over to Canada in 2013. Where I worked in Edmonton. I was appointed after just, I think, about 2 years of coming to Canada. I was appointed the section head or the medical director for community mental health services for the Edmonton zone. It's a very big, kind of role. But because of the public health background that I brought, I was able to secure that role. I was subsequently also appointed the director of the Division of Community Psychiatry at the University of Alberta, and 5 years in those 2 roles, I was fortunate enough to come to Dalhousie University as the department head for psychiatry. In fact, when I got that role, I was also offered the department head for psychiatry at the University of Alberta because they didn't want me to leave. Before securing that role, they were trying to play some games, trying to give the role to a white person who was not really very deserving, but they realized that I was leaving, so you can give it to the white person. They changed their mind, and they made every effort, including trying to convince my wife to let me stay. I was also appointed department head for University of Saskatchewan at the same time. So within 2 weeks, I actually had 3 department jobs, head jobs in Canada to choose from. It's been very, very fulfilling. And in 2008, I, after my basic training, returned to Ghana. Initially, I was thinking I was going to stay in Ghana, but my wife was not very keen. So we kind of thought, how can I still contribute? How can I still support my country, even if I remain abroad? So we came up with the concept of doing the intermedical schools public speaking competition. I secured sponsorship from 2 hospitals in Ireland, St. Patrick's University Hospital and St. John of God Hospital. We've been organizing it for 9 years. The last batch of winners are actually going to St. Patrick's University Hospital in August of this year. They won the competition just before the pandemic, but they couldn't go because of all the various restrictions, but they've been in touch and they've been connected, and they have a date. Their invitation letters have been prepared. They're actually now doing their house job. They've completed medical school. So we are planning to do the 10th edition of the competition this year. Now that we have the previous winners having been able to take advantage of the prize that we offered for the competition. So far, we've had about 29 medical students from Ghana participate in sponsored electives at St. Patrick's University Hospital and St. John of God Development Hospital. And that's been a very modest contribution. We are in the process of also establishing a Center for Global Mental Health here at the Dalhousie University. I've already been in touch with Professor Samuel Hene about potentially bringing some Ghanaian residents or fellows here to train in subspecialty, mostly in child and geriatric. Things are progressing well. I have one hurdle to overcome. Usually those who come here to train, the university makes money out of them. They usually come from Saudi Arabia and all those Gulf states. So the university charges $100,000 for them to come, in addition to their government actually paying them $100,000 per year. So I've been able to secure funding for use to pay the fellows that I'll bring from low and middle income countries, starting from Ghana. But then we've got to get a waiver of the university fees that is charged. I do have the support of the dean, and I've requested for that support to be put in writing, because I go to the next step. They say, oh, you say the dean supports, so where's the letter? So I actually had a meeting with him last week, and he said, oh, I don't remember seeing the request. If you can be able to resend it to me, I'll act on it immediately. So I just sent it back to him yesterday, and I'm expecting. But that's the next phase of the collaboration. I'm hoping we can be able to continue supporting Ghana. So it's been a very fruitful journey. We wanted to do public health, ended up in psychiatry, but I think we've made the very best out of it. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Ejapon. Thank you for joining us once again. Those are all. I hope the students are picking up as many pearls as they can. The last time you shared with us about how you, was it Newcastle upon Tyne
and on the line? Yeah, the one job that I got an interview for was in Newcastle, I think, upon Tyne. And I went to a train station looking for a train to take me to Newcastle. I didn't remember those upon Tyne and on the line. So I just ended up in Newcastle on the line, which was about 200 miles away from where I was supposed to go for the interview, Newcastle. So I was fortunate in my excitement to even get one interview. I left very early in the morning. So I still had about 4 hours before the time for the interview. So they said, oh no, it's 200 miles away. And I had to board another train to go. Yeah, but that was good.
Yeah, the lesson I learned from that is that you should always be on time and ahead of time, because if you had imagine being late for this one, only to find that it's in another place, then you would even be more late. So please, we should always be on time. And that message is directly for me. So, okay, so Dr. Ifua is going to go next. She wasn't here the last time. So she's going to share she's a nephrologist working in Delaware. A very young nephrologist, I should say. So she's going to share her story and any pearls she's picked up along the way. So thank you all very much. And I may be switching computers, so I may drop off very briefly and let Dr. Asamoah there would act in my place if I haven't rejoined, but I'm still with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ayi, for inviting me to come on here. And it's an honor really to meet all the panelists on here. Actually, Professor Ejapon, I was very excited to hear you speak because I went to St. Mary's and my sister actually did pharmacy at Dalhousie University. So that's very exciting.
Good.
And Dr. Ntoso, I've actually heard a lot about you in the Philadelphia area. It seems like every other Ghanaian physician I meet, asks me, oh, you're a nephrologist, do you know Dr. Ntoso? But I haven't had the honor of meeting you in person yet. So it's really good to meet you on here. So my name is Ifua Asamaode. I have been a nephrologist for about 5 years now. I actually work in the Philadelphia area. I trained in Delaware, and so that's what Dr. Ayi was referring to. But I left Ghana. So, well, I'm born and, grew up in Ghana. I went to Achimota School, Achimota Primary School, and then the secondary school. I was part of, the SS system. But I think my last year I did the O-level exam and gained admission to go to Canada. So I did St. Mary's for my undergrad. I had a major in chemistry. Chemistry was always my favorite. I mean, I think around the age of 12, though, I knew I wanted to be a physician. My dad is a physician. Growing up, in my younger years, I didn't want to have anything to do with medicine. But then after my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer and, I saw what she went through, I think that just pushed me. And I decided then that I wanted to be a physician, and I actually wanted to be an oncologist because of that experience. So after undergrad in Canada, I applied for medicine. My plan initially was to stay in Canada, but I didn't want to limit myself, and so I also applied to some medical schools in the United States, and I was fortunate enough to get admitted, to Howard. I had a family friend in the area, so it just made sense to go there. So I moved from Canada then and came over to the United States for medicine. After medical school, I matched in Philadelphia at Temple for my residency, and that's how I wound up in this area. After residency, I decided to work as a hospitalist. I did that for about 4 to 5 years. In that time, I had 2 of my children. I was exhausted, though. I think at that time, I had a lot of burnout. I had young kids at home. The hospitalist hours was not very conducive, for young families. And I knew all along that I wanted to go back to fellowship. So after 5 long years, I decided to, go back into fellowship. It was not a very easy decision because, I was going from making some money to going back to a fellow's salary, which is not much. I think it was maybe about 75% pay cut at that time. So that was, really tough on our family, but it was a very good decision. I mean, I had the support of my husband. He really encouraged me. My parents were very supportive. At that time with our young kids, my parents, my in-laws were very available to help us with the kids. And so it made it very, I wouldn't say easy, but it made it easier, to go back to fellowship and go through training. So after fellowship, I was fortunate to get a job in private practice in the Philadelphia area with a group of physicians. I think there are about 5 of us in the practice. We actually work out of all the systems in the Philly area except for Penn for Dr. Rentoso. So we go to Jefferson, Temple, some of the other hospitals in the area too. I've been doing this for about 5 years now, and it's been, I love what I do. One of the reasons why I chose nephrology was with hospital medicine. Even though I enjoyed, what I was doing, I was missing the continuity of care with patients. With nephrology, you get to see your patients in the hospital. You get to follow your patients in the office. If they wind up, progressing to end-stage renal disease, you get to still, take care of them, even as dialysis patients. And so that, I think, was the main thing, that helped me with my decision to pursue nephrology. And beyond that, chemistry was always my favorite. And so having the numbers and the calculations, a lot of people don't like that, but I really I really enjoyed doing that. And so that was the main thing for me switching to nephrology. And it's been a great journey so far. And I hope I can encourage somebody on here not to give up, no matter how long it takes, no matter, what changes come your way. If you have to pivot, if you have to put things on hold and eventually go back to it, you should do it. it's never too late to go ahead and pursue something that you've always had in your mind. So that's my story in a nutshell. Dr. Ayi, are you back with us?
Yes.
Okay.
But I'll still need your help.
Okay.
So thank you for sharing your story, Dr. Ifua. And so I'm sure you hung around for some questions. Dr. Kwabena Eduntoso, please, your turn. Something to inspire the students, show them what to track. And you are both nephrologists. Dr. Ifua, have you met Dr. Kwabena Eduntoso before?
I haven't, but I've heard his name. I mentioned earlier, I have heard his name more than a few times, actually.
Okay. Yeah, he's a veteran nephrologist who is about retiring with a math mind. Then he was encyclopedia on wheels.
Oh, wow.
He's not your average nephrologist. He's a math at you and calculate your GFR just by looking at the color of your skin. So
okay, Bertha, I thought this was supposed to be an educational.
all right. Okay. Thank you, Prof. Doctor, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you. For my network seems to be very unstable. So if you can't hear me, let me know. I may have to switch off my video. Yeah, my story is a little bit boring. I haven't heard all these previous speakers. You know, unlike Professor Hesse, who said he didn't know why he wanted to be a doctor, I had a very good reason why I wanted to be a doctor. And similar to Professor Hene, Professor Hene, I really wanted to. I had a math mind, so I didn't quite know how I was going to translate from being a math-minded person to being a doctor. In fact, Professor Hene said he did not like I hated biology. I truly hated biology. So it was difficult trying to make a decision to be a doctor when I hated memorizing processes. But my reason for becoming a doctor came when I was about 13 years old. My mother was pregnant and she was doing fine. I had seen her just a few days before. And then one day my father came in, clad in black, and said, "But your mother died." And I said, "What?" She had delivered and had a massive postpartum hemorrhage and did not survive. So at the age of 13, I was motherless, and I made a decision that I was going to try to do something to hopefully help someone else in the future and prevent this from happening to another woman. So I, at young age of 13, decided I was going to be a doctor. And not only that, I was going to be an obstetrician when I became a doctor. I went to school at Opokuwari, and through Form 5 and Upper 6 and everything else, I did biology, but I didn't really excel in biology. I did physics, chemistry, math, and that's what I did for sixth form. And math and physics, came very easy. I applied to medical school, Ghana Medical School, and as was said before, if you didn't do biology, then you had to go through a pre-med class to do. But while I was at sixth form, being math-minded, and also with the potential that if I didn't get into medical school, I want to be an engineer, I applied to college in the US. I applied to MIT because I wanted to be an engineer if I could not be a doctor. And not realizing that the cycle of applications were different for US and for Ghana. When I applied to MIT, it was a little bit late for them. They had already gone through the admission process. So I received a letter that I was not accepted, which was fine because at the same time, I passed my advanced level classes and I got accepted to the pre-med class at Legon in 1971. In fact, I was in the pre-med class with Professor Ifua Hesse at the time. So I entered Ghana Medical School, pre-med class, went through everything, and just before first university examination, unbeknownst to me and not expected, I received a letter from MIT that I had been accepted. And I said, wait, I did not apply because I had applied when I was in sixth form, not knowing they had automatically put my application for the next year since it had come in late. So now I'm faced with an admission to MIT, but also already in medical school, which is what I want to do in life. Was a very, very difficult decision. A lot of my classmates at that time in pre-med with me said, oh, don't even take the FUE, just leave and go. And I said, no, I have to finish and pass this exam for two reasons. If I can't get to the US, I have to continue in medicine. And also, I don't want somebody thinking he left because he couldn't complete medical school. So I'm going to do this on my own terms. I honestly did not even know I could get to the US because there was no money, there was nothing for plane fare. So finished the FUE, passed everything. And up to about almost a month before I actually made the decision, I didn't know I was going to come to the US. But it was a very, very, very difficult decision. Several members of my family were not in favor of my coming, but I made the decision twofold. One was financial, because I thought I had a better opportunity since I was potentially the major breadwinner for my family, that I had a better opportunity to be able to support the family from the US, and also to perhaps pursue other passions, because I still had a goal to go to medical school. So I made the difficult decision of leaving the Ghana Medical School and came to the US in 1972, went to MIT. And there I graduated. Actually, I was in the 4-year program to complete my master's degree in chemical engineering. And at the end of the 3rd year, or while I was in the 2nd year, I applied to medical school against the advice of my advisor, who said, don't bother, don't do it. It's very difficult to get into medical school. I said, I know. And I decided to apply anyway. So at the end of the 3rd year of that 4-year master's program, I got into medical school at Albert Einstein. And again, I had to make a decision at that time to not complete the master's degree. I just completed the bachelor's and got my BSc in chemical engineering, and made the decision at that time and left MIT and entered medical school at Albert Einstein. So that was the beginning of medical school in 1972. And parenthetically, I met my wife there. She's from Haiti, and we met in the same class at MIT, at Einstein. Medical school, you guys have all been, folks have all been through it, you know how it is. We were about maybe 8 Blacks in the class of about 160 that time. And it was tough, but we did great. My goal was still to become an obstetrician, but math was my subject. And again, trying to balance the two was difficult. Luckily, I met my advisor at medical school, who turned out to be a nephrologist, a phenomenal individual, great nephrologist, very personable, very brilliant, great teacher. And at that time, I decided, I think this is probably what I want to do. Sort of felt guilty that, I was not going to be an obstetrician, but luckily my wife decided to be an obstetrician, so that, took care of that the process. Not to toot my horn, I think I did great in medical school. Unfortunately, my advisor died when I was in the third year of the 4-year program from, pacemaker failure, a young man at the age of 44. And they actually established an educational award in his name after he died. And I actually happened to be the first recipient of that award for academic accomplishment at the school at that time. So completed medical school in 4 years at that time, and then started residency at the school at Einstein in New York, Jacobi. And again, went through the program and stayed for a 4th year as the chief resident. I was the first Black person to become chief resident at that institution for that time. Did great. My wife also trained at the same hospital in obstetrics and gynecology. So we finished the programs at the same time. Applied for fellowship because now I was set on doing nephrology. I wanted a strong program in electrolytes because numbers for my game, again, as was said before, physics, math, transport, everything had to be numbers. I applied to University of Pennsylvania and to Yale and got into both programs. And I chose to go to Penn because I thought it was a much stronger program in fluid and electrolytes. And that's where I went and did a 3-year program in nephrology, completing in 1986. Now, it was difficult, again, another hurdle decision process. I liked transport. I actually started my 2nd year research program doing tubule perfusion transport things. But I knew I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it because my passion was in patient care. I love being with patients. I love taking care of patients. I love the clinical medicine. I love teaching residents. And I could not see myself in a lab just churning out. It was difficult because I wanted to be a college professor, publishing and everything, but I also knew both passion and also financially in terms of family support. My best thing was really doing clinical medicine. So at the end of my 3rd year of fellowship, I got the position, actually, luckily, at Pennsylvania Hospital, which is one of the affiliates of Pennsylvania, of the University of Pennsylvania, and started my nephrology practice there in 1986. And that's where I was until last year. Now, throughout the process, in 2004, I became the chief of the section of nephrology at the hospital. And I was involved in several leadership positions, at the hospital, clinical committees. I also was medical director for about 3 dialysis units. And we actually spearheaded the first freestanding, not the first freestanding peritoneal and home hemodialysis facility in Philadelphia at the time. And just before I was retiring, we actually opened the first transitional care dialysis unit also. Throughout the process, I spent a lot of time doing industry clinical studies with a lot of the new nephrology medications. Spent a lot of time on various committees. Spent some time with the Renal Physicians Association. I was on their board for a very short time. And that's been my trajectory. Last year in July, after 36 years in practice, I decided it was time to spend some time with the family and maybe do something different. So, and a difficult decision, but for me and also for my patients, I decided at that time, excuse me, to retire from practice at the time. Just before I retired, I actually got a call from a very good friend who said, oh, by the way, we've been thinking of doing this project back home in Ghana all these years, and things seem to be falling in place. What do you think? So I said, sure, why not? So we put some funds together and actually had a company do a big business, thing for us. It's not in nephrology, believe it or not, although ultimately nephrology will be involved, but it's actually an oncology project. We're looking to build a state-of-the-art oncology hospital back home in Ghana. We are almost ready to sign a 50-acre land deal and start, of course, fundraising for this. It's going to be a major project, which hopefully will serve not just Ghana, but Africa, with state-of-the-art oncology, including radiation, cyclotrons, and everything else. It's a big project, but that's our goal. So what's my take? My take is, I set a goal and I work towards the goal. But I mean, for those of you who are in medical school already, you're almost getting to the goal. But when I set a goal, I don't look ahead. I look forward. Can you hear me? Yeah, I look forward. And what do I mean by that? There are many bumps on the path to the goal. Some of them are just little molehills. Some of them are big hills. There may even be some mountains. If I look ahead, it's going to be very daunting, just seeing all these big hills and mountains ahead. But if I look forward, I only see the few steps ahead of me. And if you look forward and keep moving forward, you will get ahead to that goal. And that's been my modus operandi for all these years. As I said, my wife, who has been a very devoted, also retired from obstetrics and gynecology about 2 or 3 years ago. And one of our daughters actually has now taken the mantle from her. Is now a second-year resident in obstetrics and gynecology. So that's my journey, a little boring, but hopefully will inspire some of you. And I'm glad to finally meet, Dr. Asamoah if we are online. And that's me here. All right.
All right, this has been an amazing journey. Thank you so much, Prof. That was good. You gave us a fresh new twist this time as well.
Yes.
So we appreciate that. And since you mentioned your wife many times, and I think almost everybody on the panel has mentioned their wife. Professor Adukwe Hesse works with his wife. He mentioned how they work together closely. Professor Hene is married to a medical doctor. I think almost everyone on the panel, maybe except me and Ifua, they are married to medical doctors. So I want to use this opportunity to talk about on the career journey, you would have to choose a partner, and it's something that you have to think carefully about. For us women, it has to be somebody who will understand the calling of being a doctor. And I see that for the men, their wives have been instrumental in helping them along the journey. I like the way you kept on mentioning that your wife was extremely supportive. I don't know all she does, but it's something that the young people need to think about. Some of the women will decide that, oh, I'm going to wait till I'm done with all my medicine before I think about getting married. But it's something that you need to think about so you can find somebody genuine instead of somebody who, quote unquote, just wants to marry a doctor. And for the men too, getting married is not simply about getting somebody who can cook and wash dishes. In fact, I remember in med school, there was this gentleman who was always saying that, oh, he can't wait to get married so somebody can do his laundry. And it really bothered me. I don't know who he married, but I'm like, if all he wants is somebody to wash his laundry, he doesn't even have to get married. You can pay somebody to do that. But it's important to find someone who would support your vision and see what direction you are going. So thank you so much for that. And we've also been joined, thankfully, by Professor Ifua Hesse, Ghana's first pediatric surgeon, who is also married to Professor Adukwe Hesse, our first speaker. So, Prof, thank you for joining us, and kindly you have the floor, please. Thank you.
If we're just before then, can I just note that somebody has raised his hand and somebody has also asked a question in the chat box. So maybe you might want to address those. But I have to say also that it seems by some wicked coincidence that many of us here are married to doctors. I don't think it's a good thing for the people online to think that the only thing you have to do is to get married to another doctor. I think they should realize that they can find fulfillment in whichever life partner, they consider a soulmate. Thank you. But I don't know whether you want to address those questions before. So thank you.
I think in my view, I'm not sure that, I don't think it was that fact that people actually went out to look to marry someone who was a doctor, but just by association, you were in school together, you did everything together, you studied together, and just by association, it was more likely that you were going to probably find somebody in that too. So.
Hi, Bertha, should I?
Yes, please. You have the floor.
Hi, everyone. Great to be on again, although I don't know why Bertha wants me to talk again. But just to say that my journey was a bit different from what we're hearing. And I just want to emphasize to the medical students, everybody has a different journey. And your journey is unique to you. Every bit of experience that you garner on the way is to help you on that journey that has your name on it. It says God has plans for each and every one of us. So your journey has your name on it. And it's important that you don't compare yourself to others. So you don't look to having the same experiences as others have had or that you have heard. But know that whatever you are going through is your experience. Own it and get the maximum that you can out of it. I was born in Kumasi. My father was a lecturer in geography and my mother was a teacher, so both educators. My father taught at KNUST. Then I went to university primary. Then when I was 9, my father decided that he was going to do his PhD in geography in France, in French. So he took all of us along and I did my upper primary 2 classes and my first year of secondary school. And then we came back in the 60s and I went to Wesley Girls. And so I started in Form 2 and finished in upper 6. Now, throughout my childhood, apparently I'm told that at the age of 4, I stated categorically that I was going to be a pediatric surgeon. I'm not sure I knew what it meant or what it entailed at that time. But somehow I believe that that was my journey that God was putting a vision into me for. So at the time, I know there was a distant cousin of my dad's who was a military doctor, but we didn't have much to do with him. And there was no other medical person in the family. So we went to France, I came back, I did science because I knew I was going to do medicine. And I was admitted to medical school in September 1971. And the first semester, just before our end of, at the time it was first term, we had terms, not semesters. Just before the end of that term, my beloved father died. My father was the type who encouraged all of us, all his children, to reach whatever heights we wanted to. There were 5 of us, 2 girls, I was the second, and then 3 boys later. My father was, anyway, my father passed away, and I was mad at God. I was angry. I failed my chemistry, first term chemistry, organic chemistry. First time I had failed any exam in a long time. It really shook me to the core. However, I got up, dusted myself, and determined that I would never fail another medical school exam. So the things that needed to be done, the constant studying, not leaving it to the last minute was what happened. So anyway, for my journey, the curriculum was changed sometime between 71 and 76. So my class graduated in December of 1976. There was another class which graduated in June of 1976. So we took about just 5 plus a few months, years, to do the medical course, and that was unusual. So when I finished, by that time, Adukwe, Reverend, ended up behind me because I'm sure he told you his journey. So he qualified in 78. We then got married, and I started, after my house jobs, I did a demonstratorship. I took a year in the Department of Anatomy to become a demonstrator in anatomy, because that was the business of the surgical journey. And at the time, the Royal College of Surgeons of England and Edinburgh conducted the primary exams locally. So you could do the primary exam locally. Then when you finished, you could then go to the US to the UK, because there was no postgraduate college at the time. So I did the primary and passed it on my first attempt. I was pregnant with my firstborn. And so it's also to say that once you have the determination, you must also do the other things that go with making you successful. So being disciplined, not procrastinating, not putting off till tomorrow what you can do today, all came into being. Then I'm sure Reverend told you about his journey to Birmingham. So we went and joined him. And one of my mentors here, late Professor Bedu, introduced me to Professor Bevan in the Birmingham Children's Hospital. So I did the PLAB when I went, and passed it first attempt. For me, languages have always been a forte, so I don't have an issue with languages. And Prof. Bevan then offered me an SHO job, which I took. I did. And over there, you then prepared for the membership and it was like a part 1 and a part 2 of the Royal College, and the part 2 ended up with you having a fellowship. The system has changed since then. It's a bit different now. But suffice it to say that I did several rotations in several hospitals in the UK. And one of the advantages that I had, which was a positive for me in my journey, was that because I had done some of my, a lot of my training here in Ghana, I had a lot of surgical skills. I could do a lot of things. When I went out there, it immediately put me at the level of the registrars that they had over there, and sometimes even senior registrars, because my competence was not in doubt in terms of surgical skills. So if for any reason you want to go out, but you can't do it immediately, you have to stay here, please take advantage of it to learn the skills, to learn the discipline. It will come you, it will serve you well for whatever you are going to be encountering in the future. So I went on 1983, did my, ended my fellowship. Then I went to Bristol Royal Children's Hospital, where I was a clinical fellow with one of the few female pediatric surgeons, Helen Noblet. She is the one who invented the Noblet suction rectal biopsy, and she was my boss. So I stayed there till 88. By the time I was going, we had 2 children. One was, let's say, there was 18 months between the 2 of them. And the last one was just about 18 months when we went. So you can imagine the difficulty. Now for me, God arranged such that the help that we had, the young lady who was helping us in Korle Bu, we applied for a visa for her at the same time as we were getting ours, and she was granted a visa. And that was so unusual. So we went with her. So she stayed with us. It's easier when you are organized, because you have to plan everything. You can be on call anytime, but at least there's somebody. You're planning meals, you're planning menus, you're planning activities, you're planning school, you're planning whatever. But it is doable. The thing is not to be overwhelmed by circumstances and what is happening, but to take things in your stride and know that it can be done. So you can do it. Somebody's done it, so you can do it. So anyway, going on, 1988, we decided we were coming home, and I'm sure he's told you why. One of the reasons was the education of the children, because the school, the role models they had in the UK were not very positive for Black young men, Black children. And the children were seeing Black people as bus drivers, as cleaners, as things. So what they could see for themselves was not very high. So we decided it was best to come home. We had primary education here, so there was no reason why they couldn't come. So we came, and they went to the Legon Primary School. Yeah. And when we came, I was I had worked with Mr. Tando, late Mr. Tando, who was a pediatric surgeon, British trained. And the week after I went back, he said, Ifua, what about the Americo? If you have come, then I'm also going. I said, oh, Mr. Tando, where are you going? He said he's going to Saudi. He's been working so hard. He's going to make a bit of money and come back. So he left me alone. We came in 88, 89, he was gone, and I was the only pediatric surgeon for the whole of Southern Africa, Southern Ghana. So you can imagine the load. You work 24/7. You work 24/7. And whenever you are needed, you are called and you're ready and you go. There's nobody else under you. There was nobody for a number of years. And then one Ghanaian doctor decided he wanted to do pediatric surgeon, Dr. Pedro Mensah. So he came and I worked with him and I trained him and so on. But you know, the nurses that worked with me during that difficult time, when I was all alone, I was always on call, and it wasn't an easy situation. But the good thing was that we actually lived on campus. So it was 5 minutes drive to get to the ward if there was anything happening. But what they liked about me was that anytime they called me, I was ready to do what needed to be done. And I think when you have that behind you, people who work with you know your quality, know you as standing for excellence, know you as somebody who will always come in to help, no matter what it means to you and the personal sacrifice. Even now, when they see me, it's just like, oh, Professor, things are different. We miss you. There was discipline. And people used to say I was a very hard woman, Margaret Thatcher. But you know, if you don't keep up discipline, the institutional culture can swallow up a lot of things and will end up negating the good that you want to do sometimes. So being disciplined, striving for excellence, looking out for the good things is what really matters. I mean, the exposure outside meant that you saw another way of things being done. In Bristol, they use one suture for virtually one layer. So even at the Children's Hospital in Bristol, I know they called me Madam Spendthrift because I would use one suture for the whole surgery. And they liked the way I was economizing because I wanted to start what I could continue. And I get used to being economical with my sutures, economical with everything, because we know our setting and we know the difficulties that we have, you know, within our settings. So all of those things, there's a lot that we learn from here. If we were frank with ourselves, we would each of us know that the cases that we see are a whole atlas of your specialty. And if we were coming out to publish these atlases, there'll be so much knowledge that we could share outside. So don't despise what you have here at all. Learn from it, gain from it, and then you move on. So I was head of the pediatric surgery unit. I reorganized the whole unit, got everything started. I got involved with Mark Levitt in, at the time he was in Cincinnati, Children's Hospital. And he was into anorectal malformations, and the surgery that had come up at the time was a posterior sagittal anorectoplasty. So I went out there, I did a course. I got a couple of my nurses to go and see how such patients are handled out there. I arranged for one of my junior residents to also go. And when we came back, we then set up an improved unit to better manage anorectal malformation in Ghana. And that was a key thing. So going on, I was still part of the Department of Surgery. Pediatric surgery was in a different block, and surgery was on the main surgical block. It is interesting how people notice when you are doing things that they like. So I then got to become head of department, and I tried to implement some of the strategies that I had used in pediatric surgery to make it work. And the then chairman of the board came headhunting and said he needed me to come to administration, Kolebu administration, to help them revamp the place and set up, do what I was doing. He saw me doing in pediatric surgery, in surgery, try and do it there, administration. I had done a few courses for health management and so on. So I had to then go and myself get information and get teaching. So I went to Leeds, did a certificate course in health management, policy and planning, and came back and was director of medical affairs. And then I acted as CEO for a year. And then during this time, you know, it's not just about medicine and the didactic form of it, but to be a whole well-rounded individual, you mustn't just focus on your medicine. There must be other things as well. So I was active in the Women Doctors Association of Ghana. I got active in the Medical Women's International Association. I was on several committees. They saw me as capable. All of this with what I was, in addition to what I was doing. And I served on several committees. So when the opportunity came for Ghana to host the Medical Women's International Association Congress in Accra, I did so, and then was elected as president-elect, which then mean I got on to become president of Medical Women's International. Now, one of the things we were doing as women physicians was during my tenure as president of the Medical Women's Association of Ghana, we started the first ever Well Women's Clinic. It was about getting women to teach them to do breast self-examinations, do it for them, do pap smears, cervical smears, examination of the abdomen. And the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology was very, very supportive. And they gave us the outpatient clinic in the afternoons when they were not using it. And we were able to initially offer this for free, but subsequently it had to come at a fee when we could not get any further funding for it. And this has continued. So MWAG still is involved in what we can give to people, as well as what we can give to each other and to ourselves. So that is also important. You involving yourself in community activities, in other things. Don't just get known for what it is you did. So 2013, I stayed on for a year. 2014, retired from public service, then went on contract. And then the medical school came up. I'm sure Reverend has told you about it. And that is where we still are. And by God's grace, I've trained 3 batches of doctors. And the testimonials we get about their performance is very heartwarming, but this is God's project. Bertha, done.
Oh, Dan, you always allow us to end on a high note. The last time you gave your final word, and you're also closing us this time with the words that you should be a whole rounded individual, do other things. I was not even aware that you became president of Medical Women's International. That's huge. That's really huge. And so for the women who joined us, if you want a role model, look no further than Professor Hesse. So I think I want to thank all of you. Let's see if people have questions. We've been on for an hour and 55 minutes. Let's see if some people have questions. Otherwise, it's been a wonderful program. I see one. Okay, this question is mainly for Professor Hesse. I'm a fifth-year medical student interested in research and would also love to establish a private teaching hospital in Ghana as a long-term goal. The question is, after medical school, what path would you recommend I take to attain these goals? So, Prof, I think if you can answer this one.
Okay. It's a very good aim and goal to have. There's a long journey. You will have to, at some point, decide what kind of research you want to do. Is it purely scientific research? Is it clinical research? If it's clinical research, it will be in a particular clinical discipline. So you would go through that, do the postgraduate fellowship, whatever it is that you would need for that specialty. If it is in pure just research, then there are research institutions. It will be good to affiliate yourself to. You'll need all those links to be able to be successful in establishing the private teaching hospital. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Do you mean you're going to be starting a medical school as well? Or is it just going to be private and be available for other medical schools to send their students to? So that is something that you would have to determine. So finish your studies, do your house job, determine which area you want to go into, and then we can talk some more. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Prof. And what I'd like to add is that I was at this conference where there were a lot of older doctors, and I realized that one desire everybody had was to build a hospital. And the one thing that was lacking was funds. I mean, in Ghana, there's always, oh, we don't have money. You and Prof were able to do it. And from what I could gather, you had a son who was into finance. And so money met medicine. And so the medical school was done. And so to the person who asked the question, your desire is mirrors that of many, many doctors. And at the end of the day, they encounter the issue of finance, who to bring the money. So maybe you should start thinking now where you're going to get the funds. Is it through USAID? You know, Ashesi University gets a lot of grants, but they raise money, investment money and all that. So money is a big factor. If everybody had $10 million, I'm sure there'll be many hospitals around the country. So on this note, unless Ifua, Dr. Ifua or Dr. Kwabena have some last words to say, or Professor Sami, we would bring the curtain down and bring the seminar to an end. I almost think we need to have a third session because the Ghana Medical and Dental Council, Ghana Medical Association, were not able to feature this time. So we might have a third session. So if I think
I cannot stress enough what Professor Ifua has said. Everybody's path is different. Don't necessarily, I mean, let these stories serve as a background for you in terms of what you could do. But the path to get to what you could do is different for everybody. And as I said before, there will be bumps along the way. So just, understand that.
All right. Dr. Asamoah, do you have something to say?
I don't, but it's been great being part of this. So thank you again for having me.
Right. And maybe the last word, which Prof has said, you are all going to be extremely successful. Your path is going to be different, but you will get there by all means. So have a wonderful weekend. And it's been wonderful moderating this. Maybe we'll have a third session. And to the panelists, God bless you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to do this. I really appreciate it. There's a new question. Please, can we get social media handles that we can get? Yes, I will share it with your president, who will then share it with you. Okay. All right. Thank you
Bertha,
so
thank
much.
you again for hosting this and